Hello everyone, and welcome back to a new episode of Silicon Zeros. I think the last episode is the one where we looked at grader, right, and decided that it was kind of too great a problem. Haha. To solve, I'm not sure how to do comparisons properly yet. I also, in between episodes, looked at divide and keypad. Divide, I think I mentioned I'm not really keen on doing division, but also at the moment there's I would categorize this as a bug. It's asking you to divide by 0 and asserting what the result should be. And that's just wrong. You can't divide by 0. There is no correct answer to this. It tells you it should be 0, but it's wrong. So I mentioned this pleasing fungus, and he said he will probably take the zeros out, but at any rate, I'm not going to attack it now while it's asking for incorrect results. Keypad, though, I looked at, and it does look sort of more interesting, and I have an idea for how a solution might look. So I thought let's have a shot at doing that on camera. Had a break-in at the house last week while I was at work. I don't keep much there, so little harm done, but it has me worried. Did I forget to lock the door? Could I build a lock that can't forget? So the first 3 slots over here are the code, and all the rest of the slots are a putative series of inputs that you might type. And if at any time the 3 previous numbers match the code precisely, you should write a 1 on the last of those 3 numbers. Whoa, what about overlaps? Can you ever have... if the code has a 0 in it, you're writing zeros out on top of this thing, which seems a little bit problematic. And likewise, if the code has 1s in it, then writing a 1 out... I don't know. I hope that there just aren't any cases where there are 2 correct codes within 2 bytes of each other. 2 memory locations, 2 slots, I guess. But so the idea that I had was to do something fairly straightforward where I have just 3 readers wired up to 0, 1, and 2, hardwired. We read those in right at the beginning. A counter that starts at 1 and is reading results from that thing and putting them into a latch. We have 3 latches lined up in a row so that and feeding their outputs to each other. So we have sort of a queue. Yeah, a queue? Right, yes, a queue. Of the 3 most recent numbers. And each latch will also be wired up to a comparator against the relevant code number. And then we'll check if the output of all those comparators is 1. And write that. And since the... I was worried about collisions, because we'll be writing values to memory when, hey, won't we need those memory addresses? No, because we've already read them into the latch, the latch queue that we're building. So I think that that's a rough sketch that should work. I don't know if it'll be the ideal number of modules, but it should be interesting to implement anyway. And we've got pretty much all the tools we could want. No subtractors, but that's it. And we don't want any subtractors anyway, right? So we want, let's see. We kind of want a counter. Having a counter that starts at a particular value is a little bit tricky, isn't it? I guess not if the value you want to start at is 1. Because you already have a 1 lying around, and you can just read from the counter in a different position. Let me explain what I mean. So here we have a counter. Normally, we read this and say this is the value we're reading from. But the next value that we will write is always up here. And so we could read from this instead and say that's the instruction number that we're looking at. In that way, we sort of have a counter that starts at 1. If we wanted one to start at 2 or 3, it would be a little more complicated, but we don't need that, fortunately. We just want to read values 1 and 2 and 3 into latches and then get going. So this is the address we're reading from. Get out of here. Let's also just make some more numbers. Like here's a 0, and here's a 2, I guess. We want readers for these. Put them a bit further out, maybe? As well as a reader for 1. Let's do it like this, so it's clear that it's feeding to both of these things. So now here we have the code, 948, right? And we just need... Actually, maybe it's clear if I put it way down here. Yeah. Huh? Okay, that's better. And just move these guys down a peg so we can fit that. Okay, cool. And now we can have our latches, like so, wired up to another reader coming from here, right? And so each of these, so this represents the oldest value in our code, i.e. the first one, and this, no. This is the oldest, i.e. the first one, and this is the most recent. So when we're putting together some comparators, we need, this is the oldest, so it needs to be compared like so, right? This one's easy, it's in the middle, so you don't have to remember if it's oldest or newest. This one is the newest, so it's compared against the last entry. And then we just need one last comparator with 4 inputs, one of which is the constant 1, and the other 3 are the comparators for the individual digits of our code. And this is what we will write to the address that we are checking, correct? Or maybe the address we're checking minus 1? Let's see. Oh, this is sort of a problem, isn't it? In that these values don't start out as nil, they start out as 0. And furthermore, even if they did start out as nil, the comparator would happily compare them against nil and say, nope, that's 0. They're not the same as nil, as the value in the code. So the problem that I'm noticing is that we're going to wire this up to some number somewhere, right? And we'll start writing before we're ready. Right, like, we're going to spend the first 3 ticks reading in values 9, 4, and 8 into these latches, and then we'll compare them. Or actually, values 4, 8, and 9, because we won't read 0, we're starting at slot 1. And we'll compare them and say, well, 4 doesn't match the code. 400, or 004, I suppose. Therefore, we'll overwrite slot 1 with a 4, which is not what we want at all. If we are going to start at a low memory address and fill up our buffer one tick at a time, then we have this problem that we're going to try to overwrite that lower address, even though that address is actually part of the code, not part of an input. So one thing we could do instead is, instead of having this sort of conceptually nice latch queue, we could just have 3 readers offset from the base address by 3 or something, right? Well, by 3, 4, and 5. So we start at 1. And basically have a reader in here. We would have 6 readers, which seems grotesque and awful. Plus a bunch more adders. I feel like that solution would definitely work. And maybe that's good enough. Maybe I just say, look, I figured something out that works, and that's good enough for a 4-star puzzle for me. But I'd like something that's elegant, and it feels like this 3-latch solution is quite tidy. If only I can find a way to fill the cache harmlessly. What could I do? Because, in a way, whatever the current address we're reading from here, we're sort of trying a code that ends at that address, the way we've written things now, right? Saying, let's try the code that ends at 4004. But that's not actually what we're doing. We don't want to try that. So, I mean, one thing we could do is try to have each of these latches initialized once with some readers, but that doesn't even help. They'll always output zeros at tick 1. And if it's ever possible for me to compare against zeros, i.e. not a complete code, then the comparator will always output 0 or 1. It's never going to output nil. Which means I'll always have a value that I think I should write, and I'll always have an address that I think I should write it to. So it feels as though these latches are not actually such a great idea, because we're starting to write on tick 1. Which we don't want to do. Now, we could replace them, if we wanted to, with registers, but that doesn't solve the problem at all, because comparators will happily compare against nil. I think, like, sort of the... One interesting thing you could do, and what struck me when I first looked at this was, okay, well, I need to store 3 values. We'll use a register file with 3 registers, and, like, shift them as we go. Right? And that's sort of cool. Where you but doesn't that mean that each input to a register would need an input selector to decide whether it should initialize itself from memory? No, I guess... Well, it would if you wanted to initialize all three at once. But it still doesn't solve the problem. The problem is the comparator. We need to have values ready in the first tick if we're going to use a comparator to control what we write. And I think we need to use comparators to control what we write. Right? I mean, that's really the only way to compare numbers. So what that's telling me is that we can't use these latches, even though I like the idea. We sort of have to use readers with addresses offset from the current counter. So let's try that. Get rid of these. Well, I'll want at least one of them back, but we want one of them is the current address we're reading. So, like so. One of them is the address we're reading plus 1. And another one is that address plus, again, 1. And each of these needs a reader, right? And so now we have 948 is our code, and 489 is what we're testing for the value at 1. But we don't want to start at 1. We need to start... Wait, hang on. What's happening? Maybe what I had a minute ago was fine, because... I think it was, as long as there aren't codes that like end in 00 or something like that, maybe? Start in 00? I'm not sure. Because I was worried about, oh no, we'll be overwriting value number 1, which is a good thing to worry about, but I don't think we actually... We were doing that, and it was wrong, but it wasn't because of these latches as a comparator at all. It was because I forgot we need to add 2 to the address. Because the value we're starting to read from is address 1, but where we're ending the read from and where we should put the result is that base address plus 2, right? And I already have a 2 here, so I can just put in another adder. Come on. An adder. Taking... our base address and adding 2 to it and saying that's the address we should write to. We should put a 0 at memory address 3, which is actually correct. Okay, this is much better. I believe that there are edge cases this doesn't handle, but I'm not sure what they are. Like, I think if the code happened to be 004, then... Well, would that be wrong? If the code were 004, and there were a 4 at this address, well, that can't ever happen. I don't know. I think there might be some edge cases. Hopefully the test case will show us. But look, it actually says test 1. So either there's not an edge case and we're right, or we're wrong in all cases. So we're not failing an edge case. That's good news. We're failing either in every case or in no cases. So let's see what happens here. We are correctly writing a 0 to address 3. And we're now about to write a 0 to address 4. And now, finally, we have a full code in memory. 4... Wait, no. Do we? Back up. Ah, we haven't stored this 4 yet. So we're writing a 4. Oh! I forgot. We aren't even actually storing... Hang on, do I need 3 latches? I think I just need 2, and one of them is the value that we just read out of the memory. Because if I have 3 latches... then I'm offset by an extra 1 for no particular reason, right? So if I say that the leftmost value is the oldest one, then that's here. No. Because this is what we just read. So it's the newest one. Newest one is here, second newest is here, third newest is here. What is this even for, right? Alright, well let's finish this up and make sure that we do in fact... Yeah, so we wrote a 1 where there should be a 0, and a 0 where there should be a 1. We're off by 1 somehow or other. And I think that fixing this will make the problem more clear anyway. So let's rip this out. And we said that this value is the newest number, i.e. the last one in the code, so it should be compared against this. This one is the middle number compared against this. This one is the oldest number compared against this. Now, does that fix our problem? I think we're still writing to the correct address, so probably. Still test case 1, so we're either always broken or always right, just again. Last time we were always broken, but hopefully this time is better. So now we have, I think, a full memory thingy, or a full code in memory, is that right? What has happened? We've written a 0... The problem is that in the last cycle, in the very first cycle here, we wrote a 0 to memory address 3. Which means that when this thing got up to 3, it finally read it. So actually, didn't we have this problem all along? Alright, let's undo and get that old result back before I forget about it. I've been hitting Control Z and Control Y this whole time, but it's just Y and Z. Well, the more you know. Yeah, so actually that's a problem with my proposed solution to use just writers instead. That's no good because we're constantly writing zeros over the area that we're reading anyway. So we do need to load each of the values into a latch. Maybe the address we were writing to was just offset by 1 because I forgot that it takes some time to load this thing. So like, when exactly... We first have a full code to look at when this thing reads 4, right? And, oh, something is wrong with this. And that is in regards to memory address 3. So we actually need not to add 2 or whatever crazy thing I was doing, but like subtract 1? I think? Do I have a subtractor? No. I have an adder. I can give it a -1. But, yeah, so I think the problem is this has advanced to point long past the address we're looking at when it's time to write something. And that it is a negative number is sort of good news, because it means we definitely will never be reading that address again. So, like, I don't know, I guess I'm okay with that. Here, take a -1, please. -0. Give me a -1. Wire this up to it. And, yeah, still test 1, still totally wrong or totally right. And now that we've read a whole thing in here... Uh-oh. Of course, we overwrote... While we were scanning everything in, we overwrote the code. I cannot catch a break with this puzzle. It seems straightforward, but there's all these little tiny twists that I don't notice until I get to them. A lot of orchestration to do. So wait a minute. Maybe I can do this whole, So I was talking about, what if I loaded everything into, directly from readers and didn't bother with latches at all? And I concluded that this would be a problem because we would be overwriting memory addresses before we were done using them to read, right? But what if we didn't? What if we delayed... Right now we're sort of delaying the reads. We're making the reads come in sort of slowly, so that by the time we want to write something, we're done ever reading it. Although, not now that we've broken this, of course. But in the previous iteration, that was sort of how it looked. But what if instead we just had all of the comparison stuff wired up to readers so that they're initialized instantaneously to the right values in the very first tick. And then just had the writes go out through some latches or some registers or something, right? So that we, in the first step, we read addresses 1, 2, and 3, and compute whether a 1 or 0 should be output. But don't output it right away. Put it into a register to delay it for 2 cycles. 2 cycles? 3 cycles? Let's see. We've just read 1, 2, and 3, so we can't write to 3 until we're done reading 2, 3, 4, and 3, 4, 5. So don't do it the current cycle, or the next, or the next. Means we need, I think, 3 registers to buffer that up. I think that that's a promising approach. It's a shame, because I actually had something that looked like that implemented with readers here and adders and stuff leading into them, and then I threw it away because it wasn't going to work. Okay, I think that that's a pretty good approach, so let's see how that looks. And also, it feels kind of awkward to have part of the code be here, and these are the code values, and the stuff we're sort of testing is in the middle. It feels a little bit awkward. Might be nicer to move all these up, like so, I guess. Now the wire routing is a bit weird, I don't know. What can you do? I don't know, just put it back, whatever. And I need an adder, adding 1 to the base address we're reading, and another adder adding 1 to that. Okay, and now we need writers on these 2 spots. Readers, I should say. I think we can just sort of squeeze this in here. But I'll offset it a bit to the right so that it feels more like a later number to me. Okay, now let's see. This is the lowest one, so it gets compared with this. This is such a stupid mess of wires. this is the middle one, so it gets compared with this. This is the third one, gets compared with this. Now, these three feed into a comparator, and we've computed what we should write to this address, right? But we can't do it yet. We have to get some registers, and basically send this here, and this here. Hang on. It's this output that goes here. Wait, no, what? This is, what is this? What is this doing? This is, oh, this is some ridiculous garbage that is not important anymore. Okay, great. So we have three comparators comparing all the things to the individual digits, and we have this checking that each of the digits output a 1. And then we have, therefore, the value that we want to write. Having done that, we're going to buffer it up for a while, like so, right? So in the first step, we won't do anything. In the step that we are computing what to do, we won't write it. We'll just save it. Then in the next step, we won't do anything. We'll just save it. And in the next step, we still won't do anything. We'll just save it. And then finally, we have a writer here. We're finally done waiting. We're done reading all of the numbers in that range, and it's safe to overwrite them. And we don't need an adder to, like, take this base value plus whatever, because we're actually just grabbing we're saving the correct value from the previous stage. Well, from several stages ago. Okay, what happens now? We're still test 1. Once again, broken for all inputs or working for all inputs, I guess. So what happens? We put a 3, 0 here. That seems fine. And then a 4, 0. So let's look at the goal output, actually. So hopefully we next put a 5, 0 in? No, we put a 5, 1. Why? Am I off by 1 somewhere? Okay, why are we computing a 1 in this stage is what I want to know. Wait a minute, what? I thought I understood how comparators work. I see. I don't understand how comparators work. This tests whether any one of them is equal, not whether all of them are equal. Well, that's dumb. I don't want that. I want to know if they're all equal. Okay. So how do you implement an all equal with what we have here? Add the three outputs together and verify that the answer is 3? It's not ideal. It takes a lot more adders. And a 3. What other math do I have available? Not much, right? And adders you can't parameterize, right? They always take exactly 2 inputs. Yeah, oops. Put that back. Okay, well, this is a bit of a bummer. Just 2, please. And check whether it's 3. Oh, I don't have a 3. I can't type a 3 there. I have to go make one. So, here, take a 3, please. And then we're going to add this to this, and add that to this, and send that to the comparator. Okay, so this is now how many of the digits were 1s. Is that number 3? Okay. Still test 1. It always makes me nervous. Okay, so we've computed a 3-0, and now here, we're saying in slot 5, one of the numbers matched. Which one is it? So here we are in slot 5, right? 994. This 9 in slot 3 is the beginning of the code we're testing, and it indeed matches the first number of the code. So we should have a 1. Great, but we're not going to assert that the code is correct yet. But then as soon as this 9 falls out, and the code we're looking at is 948, we hope to write a 1 into slot. Hang on. Yeah, slot 6. I saw an 8 there, and I was super confused, but 6, this is what matters. And look at that, we computed a 6-1. And now, like, we're reading some random garbage, I think, right? We're reading... What are we reading? Our base is 4. Oh, of course. We haven't stored the 6-1 yet. We're about to store it. And now we're going to start storing, like, I don't know, whatever, stuff. So all those 0s and 1s are propagating. We finally write a 6-1, and all the other junk we do. Yeah, okay. Definitely not ideal. Looks like it's working. Won't get tested out at home just yet, though. Deadline's coming up, so I'll be working nights for the rest of the week. We'll probably have to come in for the weekend, too. Soonest I'll be able to install this thing is next week. Hopefully there won't be another break-in first. So we're 7 modules over here, which is kind of a bummer. I definitely feel like we deserve that, though. This is quite... feels overcomplicated. I tried a lot of simpler solutions, and I couldn't figure out how to get them to work. I'm not sure what to do about it. But I think that I'm satisfied enough with this that I'm not going to try in this episode, or probably ever, to figure this out. We're just going to miss that achievement that says get up perfect on every level. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.